Hi, I'm Claudine Wong, coming to you from KTVU in the San Francisco Bay Area. Thanks so much for joining us. I am with Monte Francis, a former Bay Area journalist who is now a journalist working in France and getting a first-hand perspective of what is going on there. Monte, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Claudine. It's a pleasure.
So good to see you again. We have worked together and we haven't seen each other in a while since you moved there about a year ago, but it's been a very kind of tumultuous time in France. And when we talk about the coronavirus, tell me what the situation is there, because you guys have been on a lockdown for a good amount of time now.
Yeah, so the lockdown here started on March 17th. So this is week 7, and it's been, challenging. I mean, the nice thing is they're lifting this general lockdown in a week. So a week from today. So everyone is really looking forward to that.
Does
But in
it
terms,
feel like you're ready? Because I know, here in, the US, there are lockdowns being lifted, but there's a lot of controversy over whether it's early, too early, or, it's time.
well, yeah, so they would say that the daily cases and deaths, they've been down in recent weeks. So France just recorded its lowest daily death toll in 5 weeks. So they say, yes, it's time to start lifting the restrictions, and this is going to be done gradually. But, going forward, there are concerns about a second wave of the virus, just like there are everywhere, because there hasn't been widespread testing here in France, like in other countries, such as Germany, where they've had very few deaths. The death toll here stands at about 25,000, and that's the 4th worst in Europe.
Yeah, testing, it seems to be an issue for us here as well. I'm going to share some video that you took of life there, and take us through what we're looking at, really, so we can get a better idea of this. If I can get it to play, there we go.
Sure.
Of kind of where life is for you guys.
So we live in central Paris in the Marais, which is just a neighborhood here. And there are a number of authorized reasons you can leave the house, but it's pretty restricted. So for example, if you're going to work, if you can't work from home, of course you can go do that. If you need to go to the grocery store or to the pharmacy, you can do that. You can walk your dog. I'm grateful that I have a dog that I can walk. And
Right.
you can also go for a run to exercise. But here in Paris, they've changed the restriction on that because everyone was going out and running at the same time. So now they've restricted it to before 10 a.m. or after 7 p.m.
How are people following that? I mean, it looks like from your video that very, very few people around. Do you feel like people have really strictly adhered to the rules that have been set?
For the most part, yes. Although I was out today and I noticed a significant difference in the number of people who were out. And I would say about half the people were wearing masks and then half weren't. Some are respecting the social distance and then some aren't. People will walk close to you inside the supermarket and some others will wait for you to pass. So it really depends. The police have been pretty strict about enforcing the lockdown. So since March 17th, they've done about 3.5 million checks and they've handed out like 800,000 citations. And so the penalty is pretty stiff. Like the first offense, if you're out without a form or an attestation, it's 135 euros or about $150. I should explain how this works.
Yeah, explain the system, because it's an interesting thing, the citations. I mean, we've seen some in California, just, at beaches if you live too far away, but really citations have not been, it sounds like, the same as it's happening there.
No, so every time you go out the house, even if you're going to go for a run, you have to have a form. It looks like this. It's an attestation, and you basically
sharing so we can see it a little bit better. Okay.
You have to list your name, your birthday, where you're born, your address, and then you have to check the reason that you're going out. You sign it, you date it, and you also have to put the time because you can only stay out for 1 hour. So the first few weeks, it was a paper form that you filled out. But in the last few weeks, the government's rolled out this online form, so you can do it on your phone. And what happens is it generates a barcode. So like, for example, yesterday I was stopped in the street by an officer, and you just sort of pull out your phone. It has a barcode. They scan it. They can see where you live and what you're doing, and then you just kind of go on your way. But they are stopping people. I saw officers chase a guy down because he was running away and obviously didn't have his form. So they are enforcing it pretty strictly.
Wow. I mean, what's to stop you from putting, a different time on your form to allow you a little more
Well,
time out? I mean,
you can do that if you're like, out doing errands or going to the grocery store and you see that your time is almost up, you can go back on the online form and fill it out really quick and generate a new barcode. So I think people are doing that.
Yeah. But are they generally accepting? I mean, certainly there's been a lot of talk about, um, you know, no one got down to forms in the very beginning, as essential workers, even as journalists, the station gave us forms to have in our car in case we got pulled over. No one ever, I didn't hear of anyone actually getting questioned or pulled over. Um, but it was interesting. Do you think there's a cultural difference in how French people kind of accept these restrictions versus how you think they might be accepted in the US?
Yes, because I think there's a cultural cliche that French people don't like following the rules. And I think that there is a grain of truth in that. So at the beginning, I think it was quite difficult. And there were a lot of people who weren't following the rules, which is why the police went out and they did so many checks. And so
Hmm.
after 800,000 people got these citations for 135 euros, I think people began to realize, oh, I can't just go hang out outside. So I think that people have really begun to adapt to it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens after May 11th, because that's when the lockdown um, lifts, the general lockdown lifts. Not everything will go back to normal because restaurants and cafes will still be closed, but all the other businesses are going to be reopening. People are going to be going back to work. Public transportation will be running again, although you'll have to wear a mask while you're on the train or the bus. But again, like you talk about social distancing, that's going to be pretty impossible if you're on a
Right.
train, right? I mean, even if you have a mask, you're not going to be able to be within 6 feet of the person next to you.
Yeah, so let's get down to this because it's interesting that you said that. Two things. One, the mask requirement is only on public transportation, and
Correct.
and that restaurants are closing last because in California, Governor Newsom has set out 4 stages, and the restaurants he thinks might be coming up sooner than later in allowing people to kind of come in. As certainly there'd be restrictions, right, that you can't sit at every seat next to each other, but your restaurants and cafes aren't going to be opening.
No, not probably until June. We don't know for sure because they're sort of deciding as we go, but definitely not during this first phase. And the other thing we don't know about is, like, we just joined a gym right before, of course, right
Yeah.
before the confinement started, and those have all closed down. There's no word on when those will reopen. But for example, like the hairstyling salons will reopen on May 11th, but they're going to have some very strict rules in place. So they all have to wear masks and gloves. They have to give all the customers these disposable gowns that can be, thrown away after they're used. And then they have to maintain distance between customers as well. So it's
Well,
going
that's
to
an
depend
yeah.
upon what business it is.
It is interesting to see how different countries do it because here, going back to our 4 stages in California, the gyms and and the hair salons are in a stage 3 area, which again, certainly when the governor announced that, people were upset because people wanted to go back to that. You know, we all haven't had a haircut in a while, and people have been wanting to work out at gyms, but there's some questions about it. Do you feel like there has been a good understanding of just the thought process behind what opens up first and why?
Not really. And there's been a lot of controversy because right when the confinement started, they were telling everyone to stay at home, but then there were local elections happening, which they allowed to go forward. So people were out sort of voting, and then we're also being told to stay at home. So there was a bit of a mixed message at the beginning. And so that was confusing for people. And now there's controversy about schools reopening. So some schools, primary schools, are slated to reopen coming up in this first phase, but not all schools. And so people are very concerned about sending their children back so soon when they think maybe they could still have the chance of getting the virus or spreading the virus. And so that's the big controversy right now here in France.
Yeah, I think it's confusing for everyone to figure out and wanting to feel not only comfortable, but also to have an understanding. I mean, I think that kind of goes hand in hand. In France, they have departments, which you liken to states. Is it across, because again, in different states, things are being handled differently. Within states, there are some counties, obviously California's a big place, that are 2 states or 2 counties within the state who are doing it differently. How much unity and how much uniformity is happening across the entire country in France?
So it's a little different here in that like the federal government is sort of running the show. I know in the states it's sort of happening state by state, but just last week the federal government released a map showing all the different departments and showing like three different colors. Some were red, some were green. You know, we're up here in sort of a red zone, and the northern part of France is in red. That means they're having more of a problem with the virus and getting control of it, and also where health systems are strained. And so what they're saying is there's going to be a gradual lifting of restrictions based upon what color your region is. So we don't know how that's going to play out yet because they haven't made that decision yet. It's all
Yeah.
happening in phases. The thing that everyone also is talking about right now is travel to France. So they just made the decision on Friday, the health minister, to extend the health state of emergency until July 24th. And part of that is a requirement that anyone who is coming to France from abroad, from anywhere else, go into quarantine for 14 days. And so they haven't specified what that means, if that's self-isolation, or the thought is they're going to put people in hotels or medical centers or something like that, which would be more effective. But they haven't ironed out the details of that
But
yet.
they have said that will go through July 24th.
Yes.
Because
So
that's
people,
huge news, because
mhm.
June and July, if anyone's tried to book travel to Europe in those times, that's the big season. I mean, if you talk about the economic impact to folks in Paris and some of the other big tourist destinations, that's got to be big, because I don't know if by August, if they lift it, if anyone's going to be booking a flight or trying to get there.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who has plans to travel to Paris or Europe in general this summer really should rethink their plans, or definitely be ready to change them, because it's looking like coming to France at least through the end of July is going to be difficult, if not impossible.
How is that compared to the rest of Europe in terms of, is France considered taking a stronger stance, or about on par with the other countries?
Well, each country is sort of making their own rules, but then the European Union has also decided certain things about international travel. And so I think they're deferring to the EU's rules on international travel when it comes to that.
Hmm. So do you feel like, I mean, the thought that in a few days, or maybe fewer days than what you have behind you, you can go out and go back into this space, the way you're describing it, it'll be interesting to see, and we'll pull your video back up, how that's going to play out. Does it feel like, even though the restaurants aren't going to be open, that it is going to be a green light of sorts, that all of a sudden there will be some semblance of the activity and the life that you guys gave up 2 months ago?
I think so. It won't be back to normal for sure, because part of Paris's big culture has to do with food and eating and
Hmm.
being outside in the cafes. This is just part of life here in Paris. So that's going to be a big difference. I think the biggest thing for people who've been confined for almost 2 months is they'll be able to go outside without having those forms, and you can go out for a walk if you want. Um, the government is really encouraging people to ride their bikes. In fact, they have this program where the government will pay 50 euros to have your bike tuned up. You can take it to a
Mm.
shop and they'll reimburse you 50 euros to get it all tuned up so you can go and ride to work, because they really don't want people going into public transportation where they can spread the virus, get the virus, even if you're wearing a mask.
Well, the trains, I've been on the trains in Paris, they are very crowded. I mean, I don't
There are
think I,
times, yeah, there have been times when it's like a sardine, you get in
right.
there and you can barely, move. So I think people are going to be very reticent to do that after May
Yes.
11th.
Have they been operating? I mean, or has transit been, because, BART in the Bay Area is limited service. They've obviously seen a huge, drop in ridership, but it's for essential workers getting where they need to go, and that there are still trains running.
Yeah, trains are still running, but only at about 10% capacity. So I've actually I've gone to work a couple times because I'm not one of the people that can work from home. I have to go into the office to work. So I usually take a taxi, but I have taken the train before, and they're just coming a lot less frequently.
Yeah.
And when you get on board, there's hardly anybody on board. And just essential workers. And the people that I've observed on the trains are wearing masks.
In general, how do you think people are feeling? Because I think it kind of goes back and forth. There are some polls here that, a majority of people in the Bay Area and even in California support staying in the shelter in place. It's kind of what you talked about in terms of just feeling comfortable going somewhere. Do you feel like a comfort level is rising? You guys have had numbers going down for a time now, and so that people are starting to feel like this is the time. And do you know, I mean, if your restaurants, how many restaurants are going to survive? Because we're certainly already seeing, retail organizations, shuttering here.
Right. Well, there was an interview with a famous French chef a week or two ago, and he was saying, just based upon his knowledge of Paris, that up to 40% of restaurants may not reopen after this because of the financial woes they're under. I don't know if that's true or not, but the French government is doing what it can to support these businesses that have not been able to operate, and also to keep people working. So when they come back, they have a job. But we're going to have to see, because as I said, we don't know when restaurants are going to reopen. As for people's comfort level, I think, especially here in Paris, because we're such a big city, that we've been cooped up for so long, we're all ready to get out. But I think the comfort level is a different question. That just from my own personal observations of people in the street, as I said, there are people who aren't really observing the social distancing, and then other people who are. So I think it just depends on who you are, what your personality is. I think it's the same in the US with my friends that I keep in touch with there. Some of them are feeling like they're ready to get back out there, and others are saying, no, let's just wait as long as we need to be safe.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing, and it'll be interesting to see how people with different perspectives on this come together on the same street. One with a mask, one without a mask, one who keeps maybe 2 feet, and one who keeps 6 feet of social distance. I mean, are there strict rules? I imagine there'll be strict rules for kind of every enterprise that is opening, though.
Yeah, it's usually about a meter. So like, for example, the dry cleaner just reopened in our neighborhood. So I went and had some shirts laundered, and they have a line that's about a meter from the counter that you have to stand behind. If you're paying or dropping something off, you can step beyond the line. But then, like today when I went to pick up our shirts, she's got a mask on and a shield and gloves, and then she gets the shirts, puts them on the rack, and then walks away so that I can go. And there's just no contact, and everyone is, at least from the business angle, I think they're being very, very mindful about not being in contact with their customers.
Yeah. Well, we hope the reopening goes smoothly there, because certainly we all watch we all watch each other and hope for success and safety and health in this time, because I think everyone, we have been in the lockdown longer than most here in the Bay Area too, and uh, really, really would love to get out, but really would love to do it and make sure we do it safely. So, Monte Francis, always good to talk to you, and good to
So good to
see
talk to
you
you. Yeah,
from
good to see
around
you
the
too.
world. And stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope the opening goes well.
You too, Claudine. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Monte. And for more interviews, you can go to coronavirusnow.com. Thanks so much for joining us.